Pretty nice deer there, buddy.
Thanks. He's alright.
Hold that sucker up to Zeus.
I do want to hold him up to Zeus, actually.
Oh, I'm not strong enough.
So, I mean, like, the first deer I held him up to was Lefty, because he was just like, but his mass is just like a whole different deal.
Oh, yeah. He's on the same caliber.
Yeah.
He's nuts.
And I really had no idea, like, I mean, even his mass is more, just like, especially in this part.
Oh, yeah, way more mass for sure. Just frame size.
But I mean, I had no idea that this was like the caliber of deer that we were hunting. And I mean, the way he grew, he's the most unique deer. He's the most unique whitetail I've ever seen in my life. I mean, it's like he grew it upside down. It's like this should be his main beam.
Yeah.
And that's like the G2 and G3. And then he's got like even the matching little eye guards there. 184-inch deer. And then this was the Kentucky deer. This deer was 170 as basically just a straight 10-pointer. Those like the sled runner front ends. Just like, I mean, as perfect and pretty of a deer as you can have. Pretty, not a bad run.
Yeah.
Not a bad start to the year. Guys, we are back with another tips and tactics type video, a little further behind the scenes look at some of these deer that we just had success with in Kentucky and Ohio. And this is again a video outside of our stories, something that we hope is helpful and beneficial to you guys. Hoping to just basically allowing us to unpack some more information, because we can only show so much in the stories that we put in for our YouTube videos. So I wanted to sit down, give a little bit of the backgrounds of these deer, and then dive into how we're finding these deer and how we're using our apps, our mapping, and deer prediction models, because we're juggling so many different states, and we've been putting ourselves in the right position at the right times, and we've been getting a lot of questions about all of this stuff. So just want to take a deeper dive into scouting and then actually pursuing these deer. But it's pretty sweet to be on this side of it right now with having the success we've had so far this year. So we're wanting to pass some of that knowledge on to you guys. And yeah, we're going to dive into it here. Actually, something I want to give you guys an update real quick. Y'all have been asking about our merch store a lot. We've been seeing that in the comments. We just got our merch store back live right now. We also got these brand new hats. This is going to be our most popular hat, I think. And if I know you guys, they're going to go extremely fast. So if you want one, they might even be gone by the time this video drops. So I want to unpack a little more information and story about these deer before the stories have even come out. And actually in this episode, we're going to show some footage of both of these bucks that have not come out yet on the main stories, just as a little teaser before those videos are ready for you guys. So I think we'll start with the Kentucky deer. I actually got a picture of this deer in the summertime. Didn't see him again. One picture, that was it. One picture in the summer, and didn't see him again until October. And ended up making a move on him. He came in on a doe. And it's one of those places, every big deer out there has got to have a sanctuary area. They've got to have a place that they can get to that older age class animal. I think this deer was probably, if I had to guess, and based on some buddies or guys that hunt that area that I've become buddies with now that have history with this deer, I think he's like 6.5. I have no idea how old this deer is. I think he's old as the hills. And we've actually pulled his teeth, and we'll get those sent off to sort of figure out exactly how old he is, because I'm genuinely curious to know. But every deer has got to have a sanctuary area. They've got to have a place they can grow old, and we are constantly trying to find those areas. You can do a lot of it from e-scouting, but a lot of it you will never know until you actually get boots on the ground. Some of the advantages, there's so many advantages and disadvantages to the suburban game, and it's extremely stressful at times. You're dealing with small properties, and sometimes you don't get the best place. You know, the A-plus property, they just don't allow hunting. Maybe you get a breadcrumb and you try to make it happen there. So But what we are looking for is these big areas that don't allow hunting, whatever that looks like, whether it's parks, you know, state-owned land, city-owned land. There's also, when you're dealing with suburban areas, some cities don't allow hunting at all. They've got ordinances in place that ban hunting. Those also serve as big sanctuary areas. And there's a lot of those places that are extremely difficult to get access to. And we're doing a ton of research ahead of time on computers to kind of find where you can and can't hunt. Because the first things first, too, is you want to make sure that you're hunting in a legal hunting area. And we're wanting to get as close to some of those zones as we can, to those sanctuary areas where some of these bucks can grow old. So this particular deer butted up to, I mean, probably a couple hundred acres of unhuntable zones. And I was just across a city limit where no hunting on this side. I'm just across where it's hunting is fair game. And so I was right on the edge of that sanctuary area. So this deer lived a lot of his life in a place that he could not be hunted. And studying maps, getting boots on the ground, I was able to figure out where the edge of that city was that allowed hunting, and found a really nice deer there. There was a lot of hunting pressure in that particular area, and I happened to get the right place that was a breadcrumb place. I'm literally, when I'm looking for these deer and I'm marking spots, I'm looking for breadcrumbs. Some of the most obvious places are the places that get hit first. So sometimes I'll be marking my map and I'll mark the most obvious spots, and then I'll be like, all right, I need to avoid those places and start looking smaller, looking, harder. And sometimes you'll where I ended up killing this deer, I had not marked originally on a map. When I drove over there and knocked on a few doors, there was hunters already on those places. I was like, all right, let me look again. Looked again, found a small little piece of acreage, and it was enough for me to get it done there on that place. Same deal with this deer in Ohio. This deer is just, one of the coolest deer I've ever seen in my life. There's no telling how old he was. And when he came in, he put on a show, coming through some open hardwoods, bumping does. And I think some of these older bucks, I've talked about this with a couple buddies, I think some of these older bucks know when the first does come into heat. And I think that plays a role into why they'll hang in certain areas at certain times of the year. I think this buck knew this little area I was in had certain does that came into heat first, and that was definitely the case, because this buck came in on a doe. She was hot, squatting and peeing, and he was following her all the way in, grunting, head down, trotting after her. And it was just one of the most picture-perfect hunts I've ever had. I spent 5 or 6 different trips up to this particular area. How I discovered it was a buddy of mine said he'd seen a good deer in this area, and I started studying on a map where you could get on the edges of where you can hunt, where you can't. So I sort of found out where I could door knock. And as I was door knocking in February, I actually saw a really big deer with my own eyes. So I knew right then and there that it was a good area to door knock. Had no history with this deer whatsoever. He just poof was there, and 2.5 weeks ago, and it was just in one of his rut range areas. The deal with this deer in the area I was at was the spots I'd marked that were the obvious spots. Were all no's. They were all no's. It was extremely difficult to get permission in this area, but all it takes is that one right yes. And I've spoke to this dude in August, revisited with him a month and a half later, had to talk to him a couple more times, talk to his girlfriend, and tracking this guy down. He was a very busy doctor. His schedule was completely unpredictable, and went to extreme efforts to be able to get signed, sealed, delivered permission on this place. And it was a lot of time and effort and patience to get a yes in that spot. And that area in particular, access was really, really difficult. There were other hunters that were, a few hundred yards away from me that I learned. But access in this place was extremely difficult. There was only a handful of places that you could actually hunt, and that's why a big deer like this was living in it. There was a massive zone of no hunting, and then there was on the edges where you can start to hunt. I was able to get one of the places, and that's kind of what it takes sometimes is being a little bit relentless on finding and identifying those zones and those edges, getting as close to the sanctuary areas as possible. Again, none of those sanctuary areas look alike. They all look different. Sometimes it's just a random undeveloped piece of property that doesn't allow hunting. It doesn't have to all look the same. And finding those zones is extremely important. So I want to take a deeper dive into keeping track, like the e-scouting side, keeping track of this stuff as we're going along, because you have got to maximize your time when you're door knocking, and especially you have to maximize your time when you're actually putting in your sits. So the prediction side with Spartan Forge is really helping us maximize our time on these sits, because these deer are really good at patterning us. And so your first sit's always your best sit. So I want to spend as little time in the woods, give them as little chance to pattern us as possible. The prediction side, I'll get into that here in a minute, that helps us explain, helps us to maximize our sits. The mapping side is extremely important on the front end of keeping everything organized, dropping pins on our properties, and being able to keep that organized as we go along. So I'm going to jump into that here and unpack a little bit more of that information. So we spent scouting trips going up north. We wanted to take what we learned in Atlanta and take it to new cities. And the first thing that we look for is sanctuaries. Some cities, there are zones that have city ordinance bans. They have projectile ordinance bans where basically they're attempting to not allow hunting. And we spend a lot of time on our maps marking these areas, dropping pins ahead of time. Before we even go to these places, we're dropping tons and tons of pins on our Spartan Forge app. And I'll give you an example here is, I don't even know where this is at. This is just a random place. But like right here, to me, this whole area looks like it's owned by the city. All this is city property, probably unhuntable. Here's a bit of piece of private property. That's actually still owned by the city. That's owned by the city. So here we go. Like this stuff right here is private property that is huntable. So like you can drop a pin, typical stuff, boom, and we'll load a map down with pins like that. I'm being super basic right now, but this is just to give you kind of an overview of what we're doing. So here's another private property right there, boom. Drop a pin, another one right there, boom. Drop a pin. So say I've got, a game plan for this area. I found some areas that look like sanctuary areas. I've dropped a few pins. I'm going door knocking. How we're able to kind of keep track of all of this stuff, because when you get in the mix of it, the same deal goes for maximizing your sits, is you want to maximize your time when door knocking. If you're getting confused and lost and you're revisiting some of the same homes, the same areas, like you need to not waste time, because every minute when you're door knocking is critical, especially in the evening hours when people are getting home. Sometimes you've got an hour or two to really have your best door knocking. So keeping track, being organized of that is super critical. What I like about this app, which is different from some of the other apps out there, is say I get permission on this property right here, I can boom, permitted. I can drop any notes in this section that I need to about, whatever it is about the property, and apply it. Boom, I can see my green outline permission right there. Say I go to this spot just to the north. Boom, they say, no, but you can run a camera here, or you can retrieve a deer if you take a deer. I'll do conditional with the yellow. Boom, I can type in notes of what I want to do to keep track of that place. So I can outline that in yellow. Say I go to this one up here, and they're adamantly opposed to hunting. I'll bing, boom, no access, apply. There's nothing worse than knocking on a door that you've already knocked on previously that has told you adamantly no to hunting. Don't ask me how I know. So as you can kind of see, you start to get a color-coded map. You got your green for permission, you got your yellow for conditional, and then you've got your red for no access. Again, you can take pictures and leave notes and everything's in there like that. Another thing that's also different is if the property changes hands, this outline will actually turn purple. So that lets you know if like a property's been sold or something. Like say this person said no, and I'd already marked them as no, it'll turn purple where there's a new owner, and I can actually go revisit that conversation and see if I can get permission on that property. That's a huge difference and a huge game changer. Something that just came out that's also a game changer. And in Kentucky, when we were hunting, like we were dealing with some steep terrain, and some of the lots like were almost unhuntable for how steep they were. There's a new feature. You click your map icon, you can go to 3D maps. You click your little button here, and you can actually toggle and sort of emphasize the terrain there, where you can get a clear visual of like how it lays out. Also, the imagery. There's called this stuff. What we have is called UAV imagery. And if you zoom out, you can see the zones that's covered in this super detailed and advanced imagery. Every update that comes out, this imagery is going to keep spreading across the country. Bill and his few guys have built this app from the ground up. A lot of these other companies have a massive team and do this stuff overseas. These guys have done it in-house. So this was very much a startup when we got involved with Bill, and this is something that's going to continue to build on itself as time goes on. So bear with us on advancing the maps. But right now you can see these zones where you're getting that advanced UAV imagery. That's kind of the high points of the mapping app. We've been getting a ton of questions about the prediction stuff. And to me, I think that's the most important thing. And what I really want to unpack with these deer is how that prediction stuff really helped with these 2 bucks that we had luck with earlier this year. Me personally, this is me being real with you guys. I'm a skeptic. Bill, y'all know Bill by this time if y'all watch our videos. Bill built this prediction piece based on GPS collared deer data. Most of y'all probably know that. Worked for the military and was using basically his artificial intelligence programs that he was using to track down terrorists. Converted that into the deer world, where he was using deer data, live collared deer data, building these prediction models, studying weather patterns and wind patterns and why they were moving at what times, and matching all of that up. And I think that it was long overdue for us to kind of open that up because it takes a second to look at all of this. It's a lot of information, and if you don't know what you're looking at, sometimes it can be a little overwhelming. So I did want to take this time to sort of unpack that. We've gotten a ton of questions, DMs and emails from you guys, but also just personal friends that have been asking me, and I've been kind of giving them a little tutorial, so I wanted to get this out there as well. So these models are built specific to certain areas. So if I'm hunting Georgia and I go on my map and I'm getting my prediction, it's specific to Georgia deer. I'm not getting deer prediction information that came from Wyoming. It's very regionally specific. So because deer in Georgia act different than they do in Kansas or in Wyoming. So you're getting live data. In the movement prediction piece right here, you're getting your core area days, you're getting your transition area days, and you're getting your full range days on your movements. And core area, you see a lot of core area predictions in summertime. These deer have small ranges. They're kind of hunkered into their bedrooms. And also, you'll see core area days on like when the weather is just not like hot. We just had a cold front come in, had a bunch of deer movement, was getting transition area and full range predictions. Weather turned hot, and those deer kind of hunkered down, was getting a lot of core area predictions with those deer hunkering in their core areas. How this comes into play for me personally on these 2 deer is this buck right here. So this Kentucky deer. I had one picture of this deer in the summertime. I knew the deer existed. I didn't really know much about him at all, but I had one picture of him in the summertime. I go back in. This is fast forward probably 2 months later. It's October. The first transition area prediction I got was when this buck showed up. And I'm a skeptic of this kind of stuff. Like that prediction stuff, that science, that artificial intelligence is not my world at all. But what I've been doing is paying attention to what predictions I'm getting and what I'm seeing and experiencing firsthand. And what I'm telling you is that what Bill has made is pretty remarkable, and it's been super helpful for us. So I've been trying to match up what I'm seeing on my cameras versus what I'm seeing on the prediction pieces. So this buck, after only showing up one time in the summer, the first transition area prediction I got, this buck showed back up at that spot. And my game plan on him was, I knew that I wasn't in his exact core area, but that I would probably see him on these more transition area days. So I actually kept driving north. I went up through Ohio into Michigan, hunted up there, and I started getting more transition area predictions. This buck was showing back up on my camera. I went all the way back down to Kentucky and actually killed this deer, hunting this deer on transition area predictions, because that seemed to be when he was on his feet and expanding his territory. I was in one of those transition areas where I'm not in his full rut range, but I'm pretty close to his core area. He's branching out a little bit, checking on some does, and he actually did follow a doe in on us. Last 20 minutes of daylight, and was able to take this deer. So same thing happened to the Ohio buck, and this buck came out of nowhere. I had no pictures of this deer, no history of this deer, and he just showed up, and I wasn't paying attention to what the prediction was that day when that buck showed up for the first time. But once I had pictures of him, I was paying attention to what he was doing, and we had a cold snap come in, was getting full range predictions, and saw this deer on my camera. We had a warm spell come in, gave a bunch of core area predictions. I was not seeing this deer. I knew he was actually close, because I actually laid eyes on him one time, and he was hunkered down in an area, and he was not leaving. And I didn't see that deer again for 8 days on that camera. So we ended up finalizing our permission, getting everything ready, and we actually waited for the first full range day. There was a front that came through. We got our first full range predictions and started hunting this area, and this deer showed up on the second full range prediction. Actually, I think it was the first full range day prediction that we got. This buck came in, and it was a textbook full range area, open hardwoods. You can see a long ways. There was does around, and he was bumping and chasing does in there. Maximizing your time in the woods, or really minimizing your time in the woods, is critical. So being able to study those patterns, learning history about a deer's behavior, and using these predictions help minimize your time in the woods and maximize your sits. I really don't want to be sitting in the woods during all those core area days where this buck was not there for 8 days, leaving my scent in and letting these other deer in the area pattern me going in and out of my tree. And the timing of it with hunting him on the full range prediction days, we had 3 sits on this deer, and we're able to put ourselves in the right position at the right time, and none of those deer had a clue that we were in that area. Same thing with this buck. If I'd have sat there those days where I'm getting core area, I'd just be killing time, educating deer, and again, just wanting to maximize our sits. Is this app and the prediction 100% correct? Absolutely not. There's no way to predict wild animals at all. It's not possible. But I will take every advantage I can, because these deer are extremely good at what they do and staying alive. And anything we can do to help hunters be more successful and maximize their time. We understand how precious people's time are these days with family and work and everything that's going on. That was the heart behind what Bill was doing, was he was wanting people to maximize their time in the woods. So if y'all are wanting more of like if y'all are a visual learner, I'm a visual learner myself. If you're looking at the movement here, it's November right now. The deer are moving on their feet. We're getting a lot of full range predictions. If you click the little eye button right there, it will give you what that looks like on a map. So if you look at the core area, you're getting your pins of kind of what that would look like typically for a core area type day, or what a buck would be doing. Transition area, you can start seeing how they're branching outside of that core area, but not going to hit these kind of vast open areas where they'd be running does and doing their thing. in November, and then full range is when you can kind of see the big picture of where a deer is potentially working a lot of his range. And these are like actual GPS pinpoints from an actual deer. So this is literally an example, a real life example. I want to take a second and talk about the core area, transition area, full range, what those areas look like. And a core area to us is, we talk about this in the masterclass a lot. We unpack a lot of information there. We'll unpack a little bit of it here, but core areas is going to have everything they need. It's going to have food, it's going to have cover, it's going to have water. It's going to be a place that these deer can disappear and feel completely comfortable and secluded. And sometimes it's really small areas. Sometimes we find some of the biggest bucks in some of the most overlooked spots. And both of these deer came from extremely overlooked spots, and honestly spots that are really, really hard to get into. So core area is those tight, nasty, thick places where a buck can just disappear. Transition area is kind of expanding outside of that core area. They're still wanting to be in some thick cover. They're starting to work their scrapes, check on does, still dealing with heavy cover. They've got food, they've got water, but they're starting to just kind of expand that bubble. And the full range is like when you're seeing a buck just dog a doe through a field in the open, just kind of acting crazy, is when you're seeing those full range. Like this buck on the full range, that was a rut area, just very open terrain, open hardwoods. He can see a long ways. We saw this deer that morning chasing does. We didn't actually lay eyes on him, but we saw a buck chasing does. And that evening, he was still on those does and actually worked his way into us. And he was grunting, and he was grunting and running those does, and it was like he put on a show. It was really cool to see. These deer, they're changing their patterns, varying on the times of the year. So like breaking out of their summer pattern is when you're typically going to see more of them work in their transition areas, expanding their territories. So it helps you kind of head them off. Like, I was hunting a deer. He's not in here, but I was hunting a deer last year, and I was hunting him in his core area. So when he was hitting these transition area and full range days, I wasn't seeing him. But when I was seeing the core area, he was coming back into that place that I was hunting, and I killed him on a core area day. So knowing a deer and their history and where they like to spend their time is really where that information becomes extremely deadly. So you don't always have to see a full range day and be like, gotta be in the woods. Sometimes if you know where a buck's core area is and you're seeing those core area predictions, that's when you need to be on that deer. But if you were on a buck like this buck, for example, I knew I was not in his core area and I needed those full range days to have a chance at that deer. That's when you're wanting to use those full range days. And this area, where I killed this deer, was kind of that hybrid where I'm pretty close to his core area. I'm not super far from it, but I'm just on the outskirts of his core area, and he was working the transitions to expand that range, hit his scrapes, mark his territory, check his does, and it's very deer dependent and based on what you have access to. You may not have access to the deer's full range. You may not have access to his core range. But being able to know this information about a deer, the more you learn about a deer, the more you can use those predictions against that particular deer. And when I'm juggling Kentucky, Ohio, and Michigan, all these states, I'm looking at these predictions, and it's helping me time up kind of when I need to be where. And it unfolded for me in a big way with the Ohio, or first with the Kentucky deer, and then following up with the Ohio deer. Still trying to tell the story in Michigan. I have a really nice deer up there that we're still working on, but this was a pretty fast, just a little bit of deeper dive into a little bit of strategy. Everything that we're using has a purpose in what we're doing. I hope that this was able to bring you guys a little more clarity on how we're using the predictions. And again, I think the predictions are probably the most overlooked part of the Spartan Forge app that we've helped Bill develop and share with you guys. The mapping, again, is like it's a good map. It's a great map. It takes care of everything it needs to take care of. We use it a ton, but the prediction piece to me is the whole kit and caboodle of what makes this thing a total game changer. That in and of itself is extremely valuable. And again, as a skeptic, over the last 2 years, watching trail camera pictures and matching it up with certain predictions, I'm a believer in it for sure. I would not come out and do a video with you guys. You guys have known us forever. I would never do this if I didn't genuinely believe that. I'm never going to lie to y'all about that or blow smoke. All right, guys, that's a little bit of the behind the scenes look of these deer before the stories have even come out. More of a tips and tactics video for y'all. The prediction piece that I just talked about is extremely important this time of year. You're getting a lot of core area, transition area, and full range predictions right now. It's November. Hopefully us explaining that is helpful to y'all. If you want to try out Spartan Forge, we'll put a code in the link in the description if y'all want to give it a try. We also unpack a lot more of this information in the masterclass we've done. We'll put a link in the description for that. We unpack so much stuff with actually how the pitch I have and how we get permission. We also do live Q&As every month on there where we're actually fielding questions from you guys and engaging with y'all. So if you're interested in that, we'll throw that in the description too. We just did a podcast unpacking more of the stories of these deer and also the drama around them. I got followed and chased down by a crazy person in a vehicle. There's more stories on that podcast if you want to check that out. Thank you guys for your time. I appreciate y'all tagging along with me here. We've got these 2 episodes coming hopefully here in the next couple weeks. It is November right now. I hope y'all are in the woods, getting out there and getting after it. Good luck this year, guys. Hopefully something like this will happen to y'all.